Okay, so this is your first lesson. Very simply, the immune system is broken down into two different parts. Okay? You got this part over here called the innate, and over here you have the adaptive or the acquired. Same thing, just two different names. This part of the immune system you are born with. You don't have to have any training to develop it. It's already there from your mom. When your mother was eating good foods, hopefully, her immunity is passed through the placenta to you. And then when you get breastfed, a lot of those immune cells get passed on. So if she has antibodies to chickenpox, for example, she passes those on to you. Now, that only lasts like 3 months, but it gives you a chance to start off right. So the most important part of your life to develop a healthy immune system is when you're in the womb and your mother is actually giving you a lot of nutrition because she's eating very healthily, as well as the breastfeeding, and ideally at least 6 months to 2 years. If your mother was not healthy when she delivered you and she wasn't eating good foods and you weren't breastfed, don't worry about that because there's things that you can do right now. But if you are a female and you plan on having a child, it is vitally important that you eat very healthy during the pregnancy, all the right nutrients to develop that child's future immune system, as well as breastfeeding. Vitally important. You don't want to put the child on formula. You want to breastfeed at least 6 months to 2 years while you're eating healthy. That is probably the single most important thing that could be done to a child to develop long-term immunity and immune health. The other thing that's really important starting out is to not put your child in a hyper clean environment. You want them to be exposed to microbes. You want them to play around with the pets. You want them to crawl around on the floor because the more that they live in a sterile environment, the less immunity they're going to have. You develop your immunity by being exposed to germs. Now, it's been proven that kids that live on a farm or have pets around have a much healthier immune system than those kids that live in a very, very clean environment. Okay, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it. Okay, so in the innate part of the immune system, you're born with it. Your mother gives it to you, hopefully, and this system has to develop over time. And the way that you develop it is you expose your body to germs and pathogens and let the body go through the infection and overcome it and develop antibodies and memory to this infection. So the next time you get it again or you're exposed to this pathogen, you're protected. You have immunity from that pathogen. So that's how it works. Now, in this system right here, the innate system, you have the frontline microbes. And there's basically there's more, but there's 3 main players involved. And these immune cells don't need any training. They know what to do. And they're kind of like the front line of defense. If they need help, they will recruit the backup. Now, this system takes a little bit of time to recruit since your body has to make these cells. So there's certain signals that are created in your bone marrow, for example, and different parts of your body that activate the production of these T cells and B cells. So in other words, your body it's kind of like a print on demand. It'll tell it to print, I don't know, 1 billion additional T cells, and it'll start producing it. But it takes sometimes, I don't know, 3 to 5 to 7 days before you have those immune cells ready to help you. So these guys will hold the fort while they recruit backup help. And so they work back and forth, okay? Now, let's start talking about 2 of the 3 players on this side right here, the innate immune system. And the 2 that I'm going to talk about are the 2 main phagocytes. Now, what's a phagocyte? A phagocyte is a cell that eats. So it's very similar to Pac-Man. It goes in there and it starts eating bacteria, viruses, and things like that. Now, if there's no infection going on, this guy here called the macrophage will eat debris and garbage. It's a garbage disposal. But when there's an infection, this guy is a professional phagocyte and he will take out some of these microbes. And they hold the line. They monitor and patrol the border, okay? And I'm talking about the skin border, just beneath the skin and just beneath the internal skin. So you have the outside of the skin, which is one barrier, but you also have the internal skin too. And you have roughly about 400 square meters of internal barrier or skin on the inside. The sinuses, the lung, the trachea, the stomach, the intestines, the large intestine. So there's a tremendous amount of surface area, 400 square meters. That is the size of one professional basketball court or 2 tennis courts. And what they're waiting for is an invader to try to get through. And then they're gonna deal with them, and they're gonna send signals, if necessary, over here to get some help. So a phagocyte basically eats pathogens. Pathogens are those microbes that cause disease. So what happens when they engulf the bacteria or virus is they encapsulate it and they start dumping certain chemicals, okay? So it's very similar to chemical warfare. They're going to put in there deadly acids to dissolve this microbe. They will use hydrogen peroxide. They will use the main ingredient in bleach. They actually produce bleach, okay? So to dissolve this microbe. They'll also use interferon. Interferon is a very powerful and deadly chemical that your body makes. It's like a weapon to kill viruses. The word interferon comes from interfere because it causes an interference with the viral reproduction. So when viruses try to reproduce, this will stop the virus reproduction. So it's just another chemical that they use. Now this is the macrophage, and this guy lives a lot longer than this other phagocyte, which is called the neutrophil. When there's an infection and there's pus, think if you have a sinus infection, you're blowing out mucus all the time, that's pus. 70% of that mucus is made up of neutrophils. Neutrophils have a very short lifespan, okay? And the reason they do that is because they also release deadly chemicals that can sometimes get in your body and create destruction in your own body. A lot of inflammation, okay? So a neutrophil has 3 ways of dealing with microbes. It can eat the microbe, same mechanism as the macrophage. It can cast a net over the microbe and put chemicals like Spider-Man, or it can release chemicals externally and kill off the microbes that way. So it has different ways of killing. Both of these are phagocytes. They're cells that eat. Zinc is very, very important in making sure that these phagocytes work correctly. If you're zinc deficient, then you don't produce the numbers of phagocytes. You have less phagocytes to help you. Also, the weaponry that these phagocytes use is reduced. So can you imagine sending out troops to war without weapons? That's what happens when you don't have enough zinc. I'm going to talk about zinc specifically, but I just want to run down certain nutrients that affect phagocytes. When you're low in vitamin C, you don't have the fighting ability from your phagocytes. Now, the other thing that stimulates phagocytes is acid. So if your body is too alkaline, these phagocytes slow down a little bit too. And that's one of the reasons why when you take a lot of vitamin C, ascorbic acid, you may have a stimulation of phagocytes. The problem is that is a synthetic version, and it may help you in certain aspects, but it may not help you in other aspects because it's synthetic. You'd be much better off taking apple cider vinegar and water to create an acidic medium to stimulate these phagocytes. All right, vitamin D, very, very important in 2 things. One is to calm down the inflammatory process after the infection has stopped. Sometimes your immune system becomes over-enthusiastic and it starts creating collateral damage. Let's say, for example, you get the flu, okay, and you have flu-like symptoms. You feel run down, lethargic, a headache. What you're feeling is the chemicals that these microbes are giving off. Interferon will cause that sensation. So when you think of the symptoms from the flu, for example, realize your immune system is just working and it's trying to kill these things off. But sometimes when it releases too many chemicals for too long, that's not a good thing. So vitamin D can help to modulate or adjust the right amounts of those chemicals so they're not too much and not too little. So they just basically help the immune system work correctly. And without vitamin D, you're not going to have the magnitude of weaponry that these phagocytes need to do their job. Now, when you consume sugar, these phagocytes will go after the sugar and leave your infection alone. So sugar kind of paralyzes the immune system in general, but especially the phagocytes. So we always want to go on a low-carb, a zero-sugar diet, especially if you're getting sick. The worst thing for you to do when you're run down or sick is eat sugar or candy, but a lot of people do it. Stress also has a huge influence over your immune system and the phagocytes, specifically mental stress, okay? Like you're in a state of fear. That will shut down the immune system because it jacks up cortisol. Also, losses. It's called bereavement, where you're grieving. That really takes the immune system and shuts it down. The problem with that is that it can trigger an autoimmune reaction in some cases. In practice, for 30 years, when a person came in with an autoimmune disease, I would always get a really complete history and find out when did this thing start and what happened just before it started. And many times, I'm talking many times, they would tell me after a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job. So mental stress can create a huge impact on your immune system, even more than a nutritional deficiency. Because I would have people that would eat perfectly, taking a lot of nutrients, but they were still sick until you found out they were under this massive stress from some other person that's involved in their life, stuck between a rock and a hard place, and their immune system just kind of crashed and burned. So reducing stress and dealing with stress is a superior action than just eating healthy. So just remember that. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is fasting. Fasting can create a profound effect on your immune system. You would think you need to nourish your body and eat when you get sick. No, you want to fast. Fasting turns on all sorts of genes that strengthen your immune system. In fact, your friendly bacteria, which I will talk about later, actually grow and get stronger when you don't feed them so often. They get sluggish and lazy when you feed them too frequently. So fasting is going to be a really important action to help strengthen your immune system. All right, let's go to the next lesson.